Hey everyone, this is John Selway. I'm an artist in residence and instructor here at 343 Labs in New York. Today I'm taking a look at granular synthesis and granular audio effects processing inside of Ableton Live and thinking about some practical ways of using it. Granular synthesis is a pretty big topic. It can get really deep and really complex. So we'll try to keep it focused on a few specific examples of creative application. The project I'm working on today is going to be available for download. Check the link below. And let's get started. What is granular synthesis anyway? Well, it's in the name. You're taking grains of sound, tiny pieces of audio, as short as 10 milliseconds up to a tenth of a second, basically in the area before we can discern individual notes and rhythm. It blurs the line between sampling and synthesis, deconstructing audio and manipulating it into something different or completely new. Let's take a look and see how we can apply these ideas to the project here, where we can do some more subtle, maybe atmospheric effects to more radical deconstruction and sound design. Let's take a quick listen to see what we're working with. If you're already working with live, you're probably familiar with the concept of warping, where you can take audio and speed it up or slow it down without changing its pitch, or you can change its pitch without speeding it up or slowing it down. Live's warp engine is related to how granular synthesis works. With the warping and time stretching or time compression, you're adding or removing small pieces of audio. So if I want to make a sound longer, I can granularly add in pieces and repeat them to fill in the space when it's stretched out. And with Live's warp engine, used in a more extreme way, you can do some basic granular sound design. Let's start out by looking at something small. I'm just going to take one of these snare drums and use Live's warping engine to extend it and create a more granular, stuttery effect. So let's take the last snare of this 4-bar phrase. I'm going to mute this track that has the reversed white noise on it so we can hear it a little bit better. And I'll split. Using Command E, I'll split that last snare into its own clip. And I'm going to change the warp mode from beats, which you'd normally use for drum loops, and change it to texture. And you can see in the texture warp mode, you've got grain size and you've got flux. So grain size is going to be how big the piece of audio is that gets repeated to fill in the space when I stretch it out. And flux is going to modulate that grain size and give it some interesting movement. All I really need to do now that I've changed the warp mode is increase the BPM that Live has detected, and it's going to slow the audio down to the BPM the project is set at and lengthen out that sample to fill in that space. Let's listen to the snare by itself first so we know where we're starting from. Now let's hear that sample stretched out to fill out more space. All right, a little bit of difference there. You can hear there's some little repeated grains inside of that snare drum, but let's double it yet again, and so it's 4 times as long now. Right, and now you can start to hear it kind of repeating and stutter a little bit. Let's drop out one of the beats in the main drum loop and also slide it over to make sure it is on beat. It's adding a little bit of a subtle change to that sound and adding some subtle variation to the music. Now let's take a look at another sound using some granular audio effects processing to create atmosphere and variation. All right, so we've got this nice Rhodes track here. Let's check it out. It already has a bit of a dirty lo-fi spaciness to it, but I think we could make it even more expansive and have some additional movement as it repeats using Live's grain delay. All right, we'll go to the audio effects and find the grain delay. There it is. Double click, and right away it's just going to sound like any other delay. The default is set with a dry wet of 50%, and the delay time set to sync. So we're going to hear Not much of a change, actually, because it's already very similar to the delay, to the effects that are baked into the sample. You've got a spray. So the spray is taking these little tiny pieces of audio and moving them around in real time, earlier and later, before and after the delay time. A little bit of a cloudy, noisy texture to them, and that's something that you'll hear pretty often in granular effects and granular synthesis. The frequency determines how quickly they're changing within that. Right now, the frequency is set pretty high, and usually when the audio rate, the frequency of the granular modulation is high, you hear more noisy kind of artifacts. But you'll hear when I slow this down, it's going to smooth it out a little bit. So let's hear what that sounds like. All right. And it's becoming a little more smooth, and it's blending in again with the delay and reverb that are sort of baked in to this sample. We can also change the pitch of the grains. We can transpose them in semitones. In the grain delay, I can go up to an octave. Let's hear what that sounds like. And you're going to hear you'll hear those higher pitched grains sounding shinier and more sparkly on top. We could randomize the pitch of those grains. So every time a grain repeats, the pitch will be slightly different, detuned sharper or flatter. And you can hear it's giving kind of a wavery, subtle, out of tune character. It could also sound like a chorus or a unison detune effect, depending on what you're using it on. And this is a delay. We're hearing an echo. We can increase the feedback and get more repetition. And every time it echoes, it transposes the pitch again. It's a little bit intense. Let's bring the feedback down a little bit and reduce the randomizing of the pitch a little bit. Let's hear how that sounds all together with the main groove. Let's hear how this sounds with a reverb after the grain delay, to space it out just a little bit more. Definitely smoothing out those high frequencies when those grains are transposed up many octaves. And I think I like what I'm hearing so far. Let's move on. Now let's take things a little bit deeper and look at some actual granular synthesis using a Max for Live device, Granulator 2. Let's find Granulator in the Max for Live category in my browser and bring that onto a MIDI track. I need to put some audio into this before anything will happen. What I'm going to do is take some of the elements of this groove and resample them into an audio clip, and then bring that audio clip into Granulator so I can manipulate it and do something new. I've got a new audio track here set to resampling, and let's see, I don't want the main beats. I will leave in that lighter snare that we were playing around with earlier, the bass, and the Rhodes and the white noise. That'll give us plenty of different stuff to play with. All right, so let's go ahead and arm that track to record. And I'm going to capture the full 4 bars. I'm going to make a 4-bar clip that I'll then put into Granulator. Okay. Now let's go to the Granulator track and drag that audio clip straight in. Now, because I made sure to record a clip that was an exact number of bars, at this tempo, I can play this whole sample back just like I would play back a clip, and I can keep it in time with the tempo. If I turn on scan it's going to move the grain position from the beginning of the sample through to the end of the sample at its original timing. So I should be able to make a MIDI clip, and just like most samplers that have a root key, when I play a C3, it's going to play back this sample at the original recorded pitch. Let's make that 4 bars long. Let's hear what that sounds like. So right now it's doing exactly the same thing that time stretched or a warped audio clip would do. And then I can play different notes, I can transpose it up or down, and I can play around with the granular processing while it's playing in tempo. So let's hear what that sounds like at an octave higher. And you can start to hear the graininess and some new things happening. So the grains are playing and they're being repeated at a very fast rate. Let's hear what happens when I change that rate. When I bring the grain rate very high, you start to hear new frequencies being created. So this is really kind of one of the examples of granular synthesis, where we're creating new things in the sound. I can also slow the grains down so we can hear more repeated, glitchy, kind of spread out grains. I can randomize those grains, so some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. I can spread those grains in stereo to give it a wider stereo image. It's already starting to sound pretty interesting. Just like in the grain delay where we could spray the grains within those echoes, I can spray the location of the grains and start to get some more variation. We're going to hear even a little bit more departure from the original sound. So let's hear what that sounds like as I increase the spray. And you're going to hear grains that happen earlier and later from where the grain position is. And we're starting to play with time now. It's kind of moving around in different ways and creating random rhythms. What I think I want to do here is get a little bit more movement to the sound. I can switch over from the grain view to the filter view. And here we have some more traditional controls that you'll see in other synthesizers. There's an amp envelope to control how loud it is over time. We can change the pitch of it. There's a filter here. Let's play around with the amp envelope and the filter a little bit and have it fade in. So it gives it a swell and a longer release. Now let's bring the filter frequency down. All right, and then I have another envelope that I can control the filter frequency with. We can also go back and look at some of these granular parameters and modify the sound, automate the sound to create some more exaggerated movement. So let's see what happens when we play around with the grain rates. And you start to hear at those faster rates, it gets really noisy and more aggressive. So we could use this to create a buildup of energy at the end of a phrase. Let's show automation in that clip, and I'll add a breakpoint here with where the grain rate is lower, and add another breakpoint and start to have that swell up for that first note, and then it's going to go to the higher octave and do the same thing again, ramp up so it starts to get more noisy and intense at the very end. As you can see, there are many different ways to approach granular processing, from very simple to far more complex. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. My name is John Selway for 343 Labs. For more information about our courses in New York City, in Berlin, and online, check out 343labs.com. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.